Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the DewatchPod, where I, Jorgen Smorgasbord,
and me, Jim, with the G? Without the G? I forget.
With a D.
Alright, that's
what
good.
we said.
I'm a little bit gassy in the throat right now because I just
That's
a bit
right.
of 7-Up.
We're basically professional podcasters. Now, what we're doing is we're watching through Black Mirror, the TV show, but we're watching the seasons in reverse order. And we just watched, and by just, I mean literally just now, Season 6, Episode 2, Loch Henry. And I was thinking, to start the episode, we could give the dear listeners a guiding piece of information, which is, should you watch this episode?
I think we should, tie it in. We should count it down, and on, 5, each of us says yay or nay. Okay?
I see, here's the thing, I don't know. I don't know if I want people to watch this episode.
Oh, you fucked up the base point of us doing the segment.
Because
I vote nay.
I'm leaning yay.
Okay.
Because, it's actual TV, right?
It is actual TV. It's just... It feels distinctly uninspired, and it doesn't have any real wacky stuff that pops up in other Black Mirror episodes. This one is just... It's quite slow. It doesn't super go anywhere. It's just kind of there. And it's fine. It's serviceable, but, I think you can spend your time doing something better.
Yeah, no, it is a whole hour of TV, and I'm not certain... Hello, Podcat. That's what we're dubbing him, the Podcat.
He's a good podcast.
That's right. Yeah, no, I know. I guess it is just a bit long and
It's
slow.
a bit long. It doesn't... That's the thing that I think, as we get into the summary and stuff like that, what I find fascinating about this compared to the last episode that we did a podcast about, is that not a lot happens.
Yeah, no, I think... See, with the last episode, I was like, oh no, this is quite complicated, so I'm going to record, just a brief read of the summary, so the listener doesn't have to, go beat by beat with us. Here, and I'm just going to do this right now, because it's not long, the summary of the episode is, a guy and his girlfriend go to his hometown and they make a documentary about a killing that happened there, and oh no, it turns out his mom and his dad were part of the killers, and his mom is like, well, here's the tapes, I'm gonna kill myself now, and that's the whole episode.
Yeah.
I
think there are some details that are important here just for, because it does feel like this episode has actually quite a distinct theme, a quite distinct thesis statement in a way, as compared to the previous episode. And there are some details I think we could bring up in a summary, but you have essentially... That is all really that needs to be said. I think if you're not spending an hour and a half talking about it on a podcast.
Yeah, no, and it's... Gosh, it's like a polar opposite to the previous episode of Black Mirror, where there were so many thesis statements, right? We talked about it later, and I was like, oh, yeah, no, this is enough twists for a TV show. Just every twist could be its own episode. And this is, there's one twist, and it's at the end, and this could not be longer. This could be shorter.
This could be a half an hour. This could be a Simpsons episode.
Yeah, absolutely. This could be... this would be a bit slow for a Simpsons episode.
That's one thing I was thinking back to last episode, when we were talking about, it goes very rambunctious after, the 15-minute mark, but the first 15 minutes are quite slow.
Yeah.
Compared to this... I don't think there was any section that was as fast as the previous episode's first 15 minutes.
Yeah. I suppose they did have the hard cut that skipped a lot.
Yeah.
But that's the only part where any acceleration happens.
Yeah. So where do we, Do you want to go by it like bit by bit here? Because I do think there are some details at least to pick up in the summary.
I mean, my notes are in chronological order.
Because essentially, you have this Scottish guy.
Yeah.
And this is something I've noticed after watching Baby Reindeers, that I think British TV really likes Scottish people.
Yeah.
I think that's like a big thing in the UK.
Yeah.
And I understand why. It's like one of the few currently functional parts of that archipelago. So fair enough. But you have a Scottish guy. He has an American girlfriend. This is pointed out very specifically.
Yeah. Aggressively.
Yeah, they have the thing.
And she's black.
And she's black.
And she doesn't have eyebrows.
She does have like a... I don't know. I don't want to say too much because I think this might be a little bit me, but there's something about her that makes her look a bit like skeletal in like the low light scenes.
Oh, no, that's just what not having eyebrows does to your face.
That makes total sense, yeah.
Like, you just look like a skull if you don't have eyebrows.
Maybe
it's fucked up.
Do you think I should shave my eyebrows?
No, nobody should shave their eyebrows unless they want like a very aggressive look.
But yeah, so you have this guy, Scottish guy, American girlfriend, they're documentary filmmakers. They're gonna, I believe, and I think this does, hey, Podcat, get out of here! Oh, fuck! Keeping that in the episode, right?
Oh.
Anyway, so Adam, and they're like documentary filmmakers, making, the plan is to make a documentary about some guy who defends eggs from being poached.
Yeah, bird eggs for like preservation, I think.
Yeah, and then, you know, they're hanging out in this like quaint Scottish village near the titular Loch Henry, and they get to the point where like, oh yeah, by the way, American girlfriend, did you know there was a serial killer here like 20, 30 years ago? I want to say 30 years ago, right?
I don't know if they mentioned the time.
I think they said 1992 at some point, but I'm not 100%.
Yeah, no, so I suppose it is a whole 30 years, good god.
Which I think the generational gap does kind of play into it a bit later down the line.
I suppose, yeah, no. Like, I think there is, like, a good amount of work happening here early on, because, you know, one of the things I observe about this episode is how it treats sound.
Mm-hmm.
In that it does not have a soundtrack for large parts of itself.
Yes, yeah.
And, there's like this weird red herring in the beginning where it's like, are they doing racial politics? When the mom's very awkward around the black American girlfriend, it's like, are they doing American politics? And there's some characters, I guess, but not like super heightened.
Yeah, it's interesting because the other like pivotal character here in a way is Stuart, who's the same age as our main dude, whose name is Davis. I think we eventually found out at about halfway through the episode. And Stuart is like, for some reason, two or three of his opening lines are like, "Oh yeah, you guys are woke now," and
I counted. It's 3.
It is 3. Okay. And then that is completely dropped. Like, it's very aggressive in the start. Like, not in a weird way. Like, he seems like your weird uncle who's, like, a little bit weird about politics, but not extremely.
There is, there is something being said here, right? Because it's like, oh, yeah, no, this guy, he's a bit backwards, but he's not actually bad, you know? He's just, his heart's in the right place?
Ish. Yeah, I would say so. Like, he strikes me as the character who, I think he's the kind of character who would remark, like, wow, that transsexual sure is hot. You know, like, that's the energy I get from him.
Yeah, no, that is fully his vibe. And, yeah, no, and basically, at this point, we get to the episode actually revealing a little bit of where it's going. It's like, oh yeah, no, there was a serial killer, and I checked. And the first music in the episode we hear is with the flashback opening with bagpipes, and the first non-diegetic music, the first movie music, whatever we get, is when it gets to the tense part of the flashback of how all these murders happened.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting here because, like, the flashback is like a proper flashback. It's like something you would actually see in like a true crime, like a real true crime documentary, I would say. Like, it has that energy of like rapid cuts, like they've tinted the color spectrum here.
I think it's like a bit of trailer energy. Like,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's not extensive. It's not lingering. It is very much just like going through the story quite quickly. The story being that there was a guy who killed like 8 people and tortured them, and
yeah,
Davis's dad like walked up to his building, got shot in the arm, and then the serial killer did like a murder-suicide on himself and his parents, and after that they found all the bodies in the murder basement.
Yeah.
And then Davis's dad dies of an infection he gets in the hospital, or when his arm wound is treated.
Yeah. And that's like the entire story.
Yep.
But it's what kicks into gear like the actual conflict, I would say, in the episode.
Yes.
And like very clearly, it's not subtle. It's not as unsubtle as Charlie Brooker can be, but it's not the most subtle, like, here are the diametrically opposed sides, because immediately American Girlfriend goes, we should totally make a true crime thing about this.
Yeah, and she is very much like... What I'm starting to ask myself here is how much does Charlie Brooker ascribe true crime to be a very American thing?
I think there's definitely an element there. Yeah.
And is it?
I don't know. Like, honestly, there's like a lot of stuff in the UK that's very ripe for getting true crimed.
Yeah.
So my instinct is that it's totally something that could be on either side of the pond. But like, I don't know how you would do the research there.
Yeah, but he does very much sort of like cast it as an American thing. Also, one thing I want to flag here for later is that Stuart, the local friend who has the pub, is like, oh yeah, do you want to make a Netflix show out of this?
Does it say Netflix?
Yes.
Really? Okay.
That's why I'm totally flagging it. But yeah, no, we generally get like this vibe from the town that it's in basically a state of desolation ever since, even though it's so gorgeous in the Highlands. It is nice. I feel like I've been there, having been sort of in the Highlands once.
You walked up there for like an hour, correct?
I was there for like multiple hours.
Multiple hours?
Multiple hours.
You're kind of like a Highlander, hence why you're sitting in a kilt right now.
Exactly. For the listener, I'm wearing a kilt while recording this episode. But yeah, no, like, at this point, we have, like, a fairly lengthy scene of Davis being like, you want to make content out of this?
And they do use the word content very specifically.
Yes.
Which is, I think, an interesting thing to note, is that, like, they're very much, like, not shying away from, like... They're not painting allegories here. They're very much like, here's the thing.
Yeah.
It's content. It's engagement, etc., etc.
Yeah, and he's sort of like pushed back by the vulgarity of it, but he's just like browbeaten into it because curiously, Stuart, who is the third main character, the best friend, is very much like, yeah, no, this will bring tourists back. So, you know, we're, like, everyone has a financial motive, and Davis is, like, this sort of moral, artistic voice that gets, like, bullied into going along with everything.
Yeah, and I think, like, the show is very explicit about that he's like, no, how dare you, like, my dad died about this, like, he has the personal connection to, you know, moral high ground to the others, but he is dragged down, you know?
Yes.
I think there's also an interesting thing where, like, you kind of get the impression, too, that, like, Pia, who's the American Girlfriend, is kind of doing it as, like, but, like, by us doing this true crime documentary, we will cleanse you and, like, bring a voice to, and all that, like, and I think...
How do you feel about those justifications? Do they ring sincere to you in the acting?
In the sense of, I think Charlie Brooker, like, this episode feels like they're saying, no, like, that's stupid. What is wrong with you? At least in the text, the way it is framed, right? Because Pia is this, like, First off, she's American, so we're already assuming she's representing the evil side of the spectrum in the episode. And she's doing it in like ooh, let's do this. Like, it's a kind of frantic, like, we can really get something out of this. And like, she's talking about how like people will actually watch this. So it strikes me as she's being painted in the bad. I think Stewart is interesting because he's like, because he's essentially the comic relief, right? He's the like the more vulgar version of Davis, the main character, and he's kind of presenting it as like this will reinvigorate the town, which I think should be a more like high-minded side of things. But I also think that the show is like committed to keeping him in a comic relief role, and thus it's just kind of seen like, haha, he's kind of like greedy fella.
And they keep painting him as like fairly vulgar.
Yeah.
I think they play it a bit more ambiguously, actually, because I think the American in my read is very much played sincerely, like Pia, and I do think that the actual like, the blunt way to describe what's going on here is that basically she's supposed to have no moral compass. But, like, that she is not insincere. She's just a child of the system of content.
And, like, adept at self-deception to some extent, right? And, like, she doesn't have to deceive herself particularly much, but she's very, like...
Yeah, I suppose she teaches the art of self-deception to Davis.
Because she's like, here's like a way to do the thing that is framed by the episode as the immoral thing, but we're going to make it feel like it's a journey of self-discovery for you, and processing and stuff like that.
Yeah. And... do we have anything more about, like, this opening segment?
I don't super think so. Like, I think there's some stuff that's set up for the future, but I think that's best to bring up there.
So... next we have the montage.
Yeah, because he is browbeaten into the montage.
And he eventually is like, I guess I will be into this for now.
Yeah. And they go back to the murder house. They find the murder dungeon.
Well, yeah. Let's, like, do you want to focus on the montage for a second?
Is there much to say about the montage?
Well, you hated it, and I thought it was, like, entirely perfunctory. Like, it has, like, the strange uplifting note to it.
Yeah.
And... I don't know, I thought that was quite interesting to be like, well, now that he has submitted, he is, like, getting into this quite well.
Yeah.
Vis-a-vis going to the murder house, I think you're hopping over a critical step there, because at this point, we're also, like, reaching the limits of Pia's moral flexibility. Because Pia's like, we'll sell this to Historic with a K.
Yeah, I don't know if that's like a specific thing or...
It's probably a specific dig, but
yeah.
I suspect there's a lot of specific digs about the movie industry in here that we cannot go into because we're not those kinds of people.
Yeah, we'll act the cultural sphere here, but we're just going to assume that this is mean-spirited in some way and go along with it.
And at this point, like, Pia's self-deception very much proves insufficient, and the salesperson is like, no, like, you need to pitch this harder. So they're, like, dragged step by step. Yeah, no, it's actually his dad died. Oh, yeah, no, we totally can have access to the murder house and the murder dungeon. So they are very much, like, dragged into corruption, I guess.
Yeah, like, this is the way... Because it's interesting, because the episode doesn't really do much interfacing with, like, the industry, in quotations mark, as a whole, apart from the scene. And the final scene.
And the final scene, yeah.
Absolutely. But this is, like... It's interesting, right? Because it's not, like, a subtle influence. It's, like, they meet this, like, agent or... not director, but, like, manager or something like that. And she just goes, we need more. We need you to juice this a bit more.
Yeah, we need you to fucking content the shit out of this.
Yeah, and they go, all right.
I guess we'll break into the fucking murder house.
Yeah, and that's the discussion, and it's like, the main character shown to have a little bit of hesitation about it, but seems to just kind of accept it, ish.
Yeah, no, at this point, I guess he is slipping down the slippery slide.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that that's like, again, the influence of the industry here is not like subtle.
No.
It's like, here's the meat hook going through the main character and being pulled into it.
Absolutely. And then we have the murder house scene.
Then we have the murder house
I
scene.
think this one is quite effective.
You think so?
Yeah, no, I think this is where me respecting the episode a bit more than you comes through. Because they have this very... I genuinely quite like it. They have this, like, whole bit where, like, they're gonna do, like, a police reenactment thingamabob. And, you know, they have, like... They're like, do you have the fake blood? And, what's his face? Stuart, thank you. Stuart is like, I have this lemonade, and we're gonna make it so there's shit that shows up on the blacklight.
Yeah.
Because we're gonna do blacklight filming. And it took me till after the fact to understand that the reason they were dressed that way is because they were, like, doing fake police footage.
Yeah, they're trying to fake that they were, like, the original investigators from the 90s, I want to say? Yeah.
And then it's, they're like, it's like, look, I'm making a splash for the black lights. And then they turn on the black lights, and everything is
fucking soaked,
soiled. It is a canopy of horrors.
Yeah. No, I think that's a pretty good scene too, actually. Like, yeah. I will give it to that. Like, that's a good, and I think, you can pull some metaphorical meaning out of it. But it is just a good effective scene of, like, they turn it out, they turn on the black light, and oh my god, it's everywhere.
Yeah, and it really, like, flips the switch to, like, really going back from, like, we had a cute, zany montage, and they, like, really turn up the this is vulgar lever to, like, the maximum setting they can put it to.
It didn't make me wonder, like, how long do you think dried blood and semen and stuff like that shows up on blacklight? Because, like, I don't have, like, any reference material, yet 30 years-ish sounds like a lot. But maybe, yeah. But yeah, no, I think it's, like, a reasonably effective scene, and I think it's, like, I think it's an interesting, like, snap contrast to, like, previously to say, where they're kind of, like, messing around, like, they're making a joke about breaking through the windows in, like, a silent way, and then, like, doing a little fake horror thing in the... And yeah, like, it works. I think it's I think it's probably one of the better scenes.
Yes. And at this point, I sort of forget what happens next.
So I think this is afterwards, they're, like, kind of jazzed up about, like, first there's the horror, right? And then as they're leaving, they're kind of jazzed up about, like, oh man, we got some good footage and that was messed up. That was the, like, comedy coming in.
That's right. We have a car crash.
I want to say, though, before that, they sing a song together. And I think this is, like, interesting in, like, a humor as a coping mechanism thing. But I also think it's interesting that they're all, like, a little bit down, apart from Stuart, I think. And then, like, they get into singing this, like, song where they're, like, essentially about all the horrible shit that went down.
Yeah.
And they get, like, all of them get really into it, like, even Davis. And I think that's one where they're, like, really pasting the thesis statement on
Davis doesn't sing, though.
Doesn't he?
I don't think so.
Okay, maybe I'm misremembering, but I think he's, like, into it.
He's into it in that he, like, comically argues, but he is very much, like, dragged into this space of comedic escape.
Right. But I think it's, like, interesting, because the song very much feels like they're making this jaunty song out of the horrors they witnessed, which, again, very much, like, thesis statement is being plastered against the camera here. I think a little bit. And then the car crash happens.
Yeah, I don't know. I think this is supposed to be, like, a humanizing moment where it's trying to sort of get back to the tone of oh yeah, no, they're doing it. They're doing the thing. You know, there is like a little bit of a they're succeeding at their task bit going on, and I think this is very much supposed to be like a sympathetic moment.
I think it is in a way, but I think it is also like pointing out a little bit of like, you know, because I don't want to get into this too much before we discuss the thesis statement as a whole, but it is talking a little bit about how like turning this horrible thing into entertainment, right? Like that's the thing, and it's in a subtle way, in like I think a kind of sympathetic lens, which is interesting.
Yeah, and then they have a car crash. We don't know why. Right, they're like kind of distracted by the singing.
I think that just as Davis is driving, and then
it's I actually genuinely got mixed up and thought like Stewart was driving.
I also think so, and I think the reason is because they're in the UK and driving on the wrong side of the road.
Yeah,
because I had the same moment when because the next scene is them in the hospital, and he's like, "I'm sorry, I messed up," so implying he was driving, and I was like, "Were you?" And then I thought about it for a second, I was like, "Oh yeah."
See, what I was thinking is that they're like covering for Stewart for some reason. That they were like, because like they repeated, and so I was like, oh, I guess they've gotten their story straight or something.
Yeah, that's not what I got out of it. I think like we could rewatch it and make
sure,
but I'm not interested.
You got me with they're in the UK and that's why the car is wrong, but because like it doesn't go anywhere. It's not like they're covering. This is delivered on. No, they're just driving a bad car.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting just that the car crash, like as a narrative tool, literally just done to separate the three of them, right?
Yes.
Which is, I think, is interesting, right? Like it's remarkably heavy, like, and it seems the other two walked away from it fine.
Yeah, it's not. I think it's supposed to heighten attention, right? Because what this episode is basically trying to do is keep you from being bored, and they're right because they have like a thing and they really want you to sit there and be a bit tense at all times.
Yeah,
that's why there's like racial politics. That's where like there's always like some amount of discomfort going on between all characters. There's no music. Like they try to keep you tense, and with the car crash they're like, yeah, no, that relief back to tension. And now it does serve a function of separating them. It does also serve a function of, I think, just like spiking you a bit so you don't fall asleep.
Yeah, like it's the moment, because it's interesting because they don't drag out the moment of like, oh god, are they okay? Like it's like what, like a beat, and then it's like, okay, he got concussed, everyone else is fine. Like it's the smallest possible bad outcome of like a car crash essentially. Yeah. So, like, they don't drag out that tension.
No.
But they're like, okay, now they're separated. What's going to happen next? And that's when they get into the other bits of tension coming up here.
Yeah, and, I mean, we're basically at the end of the episode already. Like,
yeah, there's a final, like, shot reverse shot is the wrong, but, like, you know, two separate scenes being played out.
Yes.
Mirrored here, because this is where the reveal comes in, right? So you have the American girlfriend, Pia, who is also black, and that's not a thing anymore. That was a thing for the first 5 minutes of the episode. Now it's fine.
Yeah, no, now she's accepted by the Scots.
She has been accepted. She's back at home with Davis's mum, who also, like, previously, I think it's interesting to note that, like, most of the only other person in the town we've met at this point is Stuart's dad, who's very much like, you fuckers shouldn't be doing this movie. It's messed up.
Yes, he keeps saying that as if in an ominous way.
Yeah.
But he's also a drunk.
Yeah.
Those are his two traits.
And then we have the other old person in the village, which is Davis's mum. And she's like, oh yeah, you should really do this documentary to, like, kind of avenge your dad in, like, a way, which I think is fascinatingly put. But yeah, like, it's essentially what she's about.
Yeah.
And So Pia, the American girlfriend, is reviewing the tapes they've shot. That's like the one half of this like mirrored scene. Mm-hmm. And the other is Davis in the hospital being approached by
Stuart's dad.
Yeah, who is a drunk. But he's like moving towards him all spooky like.
Yes. And they do sort of like I guess, a transposition of tension.
Yeah.
Because, like, the initial building of tension is mainly Stuart's dad, like, approaching David in a, like, he's crawled out of hospital bed. We don't actually know why he's there. I guess he may have been the other side of the car crash.
Maybe, yeah. I didn't think about it. I kind of just thought he was there because he was old.
It's entirely unclear, but
he's like mooing on his like one crutch through this dimly lit hospital where apparently the only other patient is Davis.
that's right. There's the lights are off and there's two guys in the hospital.
If we know anything about UK healthcare, it's that they have a lot of free beds and a lot of leftover labor that doesn't go anywhere.
Well, yeah. And yeah, that's sort of where they build tension. And but it is sort of shot in parallel with her reviewing the tapes. And there's also, like, one might initially read that, oh yeah, no, this is just, like, her knowing nothing while he gets murked in the hospital or something. Yeah. But no, see, Stuart's dad is like, I know something, I don't have evidence, something bad is happening. And instead of him telling us, we get to see the tapes.
Yeah, because essentially Pia, at some point, like, there's something wrong with the tapes. And so, like, the tapes they were using to record in the murder house. And so they go, let's use this old tape of your mom watching Bergerac. Yes. And when that finishes, she's doing stretches. And then there's like, oh, suddenly, this tape contains footage of the people being killed. And Davis's dad and mum are in them. That's right. It's very jaunty, first of all.
Yeah.
It's very, very jaunty.
Grand old time doing murder torture. And she's wearing, like, a sick carnival mask.
Yeah. It's really stylish in a way, even though the two guys are doing nothing to get into the, like, carnival vibe.
Yeah, no, very much like a misaligned vibes. But, you know, we get the jump scare of the mum comes in, so she slams shut the laptop, and the tension now is, as the mum's seen this, the American girlfriend fucking discover her murder secret, and she hasn't.
Yeah.
But the American girlfriend's like, oh boy, I need to leave right now. And, well, I have here in my notes, in capital letters, leave. Then I have bad poker face. Because she plays this so fucking badly.
It's remarkable, because in a way, I kind of expected her to be like, I don't know, and I think maybe I played this up too much in my head, but I thought she was going to be like the amoral, like, oh yeah, let's exploit this as much as possible. And it turns out that does not shield you from being in the house with a serial killer.
Yeah.
So she really sucks, and she's like, I'm going to go to the bathroom because I'm ambiguously sick or feeling bad. And then she goes, I'm going to go walk out at what must be like damn near midnight in the Scottish Highlands. Just have a walk outside in the complete dark.
Which is like at this point she has like completely roused so much suspicion. So the mum goes up and sees like, oh no, she found my murder tape, and drives after her and catches up to her, and American girlfriend Pia like runs off into nowhere, is being chased by the mum with a flashlight.
Yeah.
Tries to like ford a stream, slips, cracks her head.
Yeah, fucking dies.
Just silently.
Yeah, it's wild, right? Like, it's in a way I get it. Like, this feels like a, I know it's going to be a really weird comparison, but it's like a Game of Thrones moment of like, what do you think is going to happen? Sometimes people just fucking die.
Yeah, no, I was watching a different TV show where also someone at a climactic moment, instead of doing something, just slips and cracks their head open. So, I think Charlie Brooker is tapping into something here.
It's like an interesting thing, right? Because like, the mom is not chasing her. Like, I think she's like standing by her car, which is now parked, looking around with a flashlight and going, I guess she's not out there. I guess my cover is blown. Yeah. I'll see ya. And she just keeps running. And
yeah, like, I need to kill myself now is what she thinks.
Yeah, and we're getting to that in a moment. But I want to say, maybe this is where I'm analyzing it from the like logical perspective too much and not the emotional one. But also, if you're like a 20, 30 something young person and a woman who must be in her like late 60s is chasing after you, serial killer or not, I'm taking that fight.
I don't know. Like she's got killing experience.
I guess so, but like she had a drill. She doesn't have a drill now, probably. But I don't know. It's just one of those things where like at some point, I would just stop running into the dark. But I don't know. It's like a pet peeve or like a minor nitpick.
It is a bit of a setup and delivery because in the beginning, like the murder victims, like not being found, not being like noticed, is sort of explained away as like, oh yeah, no, like people get lost. This is the Highlands.
I think it's more than people get lost. It's more like people sometimes die, and I was like, that was kind of like a really. Because there's like 8 people over a couple of years, and I'm like, that seems like a good amount. Like, I get it's a tourist place, but
he this is jumping back quite a bit now, but he does say a thing like very specifically where it's like, oh yeah, I guess nobody ever tallied up the numbers, which is straight up, I think, more or less a reference to like the UK's most famous serial killer got, because someone in a funeral home just like checked the numbers and was like, oh boy, this is a lot of people fucking dying. So like I think this checks out.
I mean, I guess that's fair enough. It didn't make me raise an eyebrow, but it's not. This is me not... I'm not trying to cinema sense this.
Yeah, no.
I accept it.
Yeah, and it is, I guess, a minor payoff for like, yeah, no, don't run into the Highlands. You'll just slip on a rock and die.
Which is the thesis statement that we've been alluding to.
Yeah, I mean,
Highlands
I guess...
are scary.
I suppose.
But yeah, then the mom goes home, fascinatingly just like gets all of her murder tapes, puts them on there with like her murder souvenirs, I want to say, box. Yeah,
they've got like Polaroids of the murdering.
As you do. She really collected a lot of evidence. I think she'd make a great cop.
Well...
But yeah, and then they leave it, and she writes a note. It's like, for your film, I want to say is what she writes.
For your film, Mom.
And then she puts on the mask again and hangs herself.
Yeah.
So she's got a flair for the dramatic, clearly. Like she was doing all of the theatricality in her and the boys group. She was definitely a theater kid.
And I think we hard cut to like the future when Davis has made this into a documentary.
Yeah.
And is winning an award for it.
Yeah.
And is being interviewed on his own documentary, which is sort of, I think, intercut with him like actually finding out. And it's not, I think it's quite purposefully like interspersed that those are not separable scenes. For like the viewer, and we very rapidly progress through like, oh yeah, no, he's made this a documentary. It's on Streamberry, and he's won a BAFTA with it.
Yeah, which is a mask, by the way.
Yes, I have twice. My final 2 notes are masks, and he wins the BAFTA. He has like an awkward interaction at the after party, where someone's like, oh my god, you're so good. You're such a good filmmaker.
It really makes me want to just like hang out in one of those parties to see if that's what happens, because you'd think this is something Charlie Brooker would know about, right?
Yeah, no, I think there's a bit of an axe being ground here.
Yeah.
And the final scene is him just like sitting in his hotel room looking at the BAFTA, which is a mask, and taking a video call with Stuart, who is overjoyed that the town is reinvigorated and people are partying. And in the background, you see 2 people have like the fucking mask.
Yeah.
That the mom had in the murder video.
Yeah, it's true crime tourism, which...
That's right.
Which also has merchandising.
That's...
It's a really hard cut, right, to like, some of the real stuff Netflix has put out.
Yeah.
Yeah, like with true crime, serial killer documentaries, all of that sort of stuff. And Yeah, that's the episode in a nutshell, right? And I think if we're gonna start analyzing it, I think like if we're just gonna put it in one word, at least me as I was thinking about it, it's just the word like exploitation in really big capital letters.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what I was thinking about earlier when they're talking about like, oh yeah, this like they kind of make the mention like, oh, this is one of those few like natural areas that haven't been consumed by implicitly capitalism, but we don't use that word, and stuff like that. So like it's very much obsessed with the concept of like exploitation for entertainment, for profit, for other motives than just processing, which is I think the like fake cover they put on top of it.
I mean, I think I don't know if you're just thinking in those broad terms, but I think this is like a. Now you're the Black Mirror expert, but to me this just reads like straight up, like an anti-true crime screed.
Oh yeah, and like I'm anti-true crime, and I look at this and I'm like, okay, like it feels, as a whole, a bit weak, maybe.
Yeah,
because like if we're gonna analyze true crime, like the thing. I don't talk to people who are into true crime, you know? But I imagine, like, the sort of arguments you would get from people who want to respond to the claim that true crime is exploitative is, on one hand, you can say, oh, it's just entertainment, it happened so long ago. On the other hand, I think you get a lot of people who are like, oh yeah, the true crime documentaries are gonna get, like, people to process, they're gonna, like, find out the truth about things and just, like, get a bigger picture of it, right? And I think one thing that I think is really interesting about this episode is that it totally proves one of those points right. They find out the real truth behind the murders. Right, like that's just objectively the case. They find hard evidence, they find everything, and like they even have like a bit of a news clipping at the end where like, oh yeah, now it's figured out.
Yeah, I don't know how much I agree with your read that it's like about exploitation, because okay. I think it's just straight up saying like this is vulgar. And I don't know how much beyond that you can read it, because like that's really what it lingers on, right?
Yeah,
the vulgarity of it, like the scene we went into maybe the most detail on, like the blacklight reveal is like, oh yeah, no, this is vulgar. And so I think it is primarily just like sort of a j'accuse piece.
I can see that. I think it's interesting because to me, I draw the parallel between like the mentions they make about like nature that's unexploited and like this quote unquote egg vigilante guy from the start about how he's doing like he's fighting against exploitation and stuff like that. And I think I don't know, to me that implies that they wanted to make this bigger. Now whether or not they succeed, different question.
Yes. No. I think we're on the same page now. Because I missed those beats, and I think that's probably because they don't fucking land.
No.
Like it but I think that is more or less it, right? It's about the vulgarity of it and it tries to be about the exploitative nature. And I guess you could say that very much it takes because Pia is like in the mechanics of the episode, she is the force that pushes Davis into you should make this a thing. And then she fucking dies.
Yeah.
And disappears, and he's like, he continues on the trajectory.
I think it's an interesting thing to link, because I think there's some implication here that digging into the past is a bad thing, right? Like, because they do find out the truth, so in that way you could make the case that like true crime is justified, right? Like it does fulfill that point. But I think it's interesting, right? Because she dies, essentially because she dug into it. He becomes, at least my read on the final scene is that he's like deeply apathetic, like unhappy with where he is in life. Like he does not seem like, oh yeah, I got it somewhere. Stewart loves it, right? Stewart is getting a lot of money from it, and he's super happy about that. But like, it does strike me as like if you dig into this sort of stuff, you will find stuff that, while true, like while you find the truth, it does not pragmatically benefit most people here. I think it's at least an interesting point, because that's kind of what drunk Stewart's dad kind of says. Like, he says, like, he has like a fall or something in the stairs in the middle of the episode, and he's going like, you guys shouldn't be digging into this, like there's nothing, like he does say something along the lines of like it's vulgar and gross and whatever. At least that's the vibe I get, but it's also like just let it rest, just let the past be gone, right?
But then he's in the documentary,
which I think is very weird.
Well, I think what is happening there, if nothing else, is that we're finding out why he had an inkling, which is because he had a weird threesome with Davis's parents once.
I don't think it's specifically a threesome. I think he said something like we played some weird sexual games and he got a bad vibe. But he might have had a threesome. Like, this might... Yeah. The point might be that this guy was sort of like the village bicycle previously. Yeah. I think there's interesting backstory here.
Yeah, but it is very much to just like answer like, why did he know this? But I think, like, it does end up saying, like, well, he also gets dragged in.
Yeah.
But I guess we can't really blame him, because, like, if the guy whose mother fucking killed herself over being a serial killer who got found out by someone who's disappeared forever, I don't think you can say no to that guy.
I guess not. I think there's also kind of a point, because, like, I think in the documentary, like, the little clip we see of him talking about his weird sex games with the serial killer couple, he seems a bit more put together. Mm-hmm. Like, I want to say he looks a bit less like a drunk. So I think maybe there's a point of, like, in vino veritas, right? Where, like, when he's drunk, he's like, actually, this thing sucks, and I hate all of you. But I think I'm applying a lot of analysis here that maybe beyond what was actually thought in the episode, but... I don't know, I think there might be something there.
Yeah, no. I want to deploy an analogy on this episode.
Okay.
Which is just the monkey's paw.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Because, like, there's... So, I want to split the episode a bit into Pia and into Davis. Mm-hmm. Because Pia is like, hell yeah, fucking monkey's paw me right the fuck up. And Davis is who is the actual beneficiary, so he would have to be the proper monkey's paw user. He's not into it. He's into it far too slowly to be like a monkey's paw guy.
Yeah, he's the one who looks at the monkey's paw and goes, guys, I don't know if we should fuck around with this dead ape hand. Like, it seems a little bit weird, doesn't it?
And I think the episode is very much interested in, like, deploying that as, like, a fun twist.
Mm-hmm.
But it's... What strikes me is that, like, the logic of the monkey's paw as a morality fable doesn't work for this. And I don't know if it's supposed to, because... Like, he buys in far too slowly.
His crime is being bullied into this, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's him, quote-unquote, making the wish.
Yeah.
And it's very strange, right? Because, like, from his perspective, right, he just comes home from the hospital having heard, like, hey, dude, I think your mom's, like, the serial killer. And he probably goes, I don't know about that, dude. And comes back to his mom having hung himself with a bunch of evidence that she's the serial killer, his girlfriend gone. And, like, whatever a person did in that moment, I think I would have a lot of leeway,
Yeah. They do set up, like, another brand here, just, like, very offhandedly, because the girlfriend is sort of implied is never found. They're just like, oh yeah, no, we'll do, like, a sequel about looking for her body. I don't know if you caught that, but I think that is one of the more apt digs at the industry.
Yeah.
Because at that point, it is just like vulgar, just like pointing the finger.
I think it's also like, I think there's like an interesting contrast. Like, if I'm gonna give it to the episode a little bit, I think there's an interesting contrast between Stewart who is this, like, very lowbrow Scottish bartender, swears a lot, talks about the wokes, and so on. And he's very much like the lowbrow...
diversity.
Yeah, and diversity. And he's very much like the lowbrow exploiter in this fable.
Yeah.
Or at least, like there's recipients of exploiter. There's the people who are actually doing the exploiting, which is the main couple. And then there's the recipients, right?
Yeah.
He's the lowbrow one. And then there's the, like, agent and, like, the fancy academy people, stuff like that, who are the highbrow exploiters. Where it's, like, you know, they really drill in, like, hey, this entire social setting is fake. Everyone's, like, lying to each other. And they're just, like, gleefully talking about this from a distance. You know, it's like it's the decadent court, essentially.
Yes. And I think I'm really coming around to exploitation as a way of reading this now, because, like, exploitation always needs someone who's exploited, right?
Yeah.
And, like, with this episode is not at all interested in, like, the dignity of the victims. They're, like, sort of gestures at, like, oh yeah, that's probably vulgar, because,
I don't think it's interested in the serial killer's victims at all.
Yeah, no. And, like, I think it gestures at that when it's like, oh yeah, no, they just used the murder tapes in the TV show, which is like, hot damn.
That's rough. But they never address it, right? Like,
yes.
They never talk about it.
So, if we're applying exploitation as a framework here, there has to be someone else who's being exploited, and it's fucking Davis.
It's Davis, and, like, I think before we realize his mom is the serial killer, you might extend that to his mom.
Yes.
But she's in on it. Davis kind of becomes in on it. So it's fundamentally about sort of, like, self-exploitation, like taking your suffering and making it into a documentary, which is, like, extremely weird in the context of true crime.
Counterpoint. I don't think that's what's happening. I think the episode is trying to pull a fast one on us, in that it's like, oh yeah, no, so, you know how we don't care about the victims? The person we actually care about, whoops, he's also a victim. Yeah. Right? Like, that's what they're doing. Like, that's sort of how they sort of sneak that in through the back door. So they're identifying the artist who is being, like, degraded, like, with the victim of the exploitation as well.
I think there's some truth to that. It doesn't super ring true to me, though.
I think it's what they're saying.
I think it's probably right.
I think it's what they're doing. I think it's what they're saying. I don't know if it's that clever a thing to say.
I think, like, the main thing for me is that it doesn't super ring true, just based on the fact that he's not in the movie in the same sense that the victims who are in, like, their underwear being tortured by this, like, sexual deviant serial killer are literally in there being tortured to death. Like, it's one of those things where, like, okay, yeah, I can see we're all victims in this. But it's like, you know, it's like, there's been a crop drought here. Who is the real victim? The farmers who are dying and cannibalizing each other, or the baker in the nearby city who can't make his cake? Like, it's like, I can see we're all being harmed here, but...
Yeah, but I genuinely think that's more or less where the episode lands, because it is, like, the only party that is being painted, like, thoroughly unsympathetically is the Streamberry concern, right? Yeah. So I think that's sort of how he turns it a bit populist, and he's like, oh yeah, no, I, the artist, am on your side, the common man.
We are also being exploited by, and I think, like, you could probably, this is where I think you could probably use the runtime a bit better, because I think you could have really driven home the point that, like, the people who are making these true crime documentaries, right, get pulled into the life of, like, oh yeah, let's sensationalize more, let's do more of this, because that's how we pay our rent. Like, there's... Yeah. I think that's a very interesting missing part, is that there's never, like, an economic reason they decide to do this, right? Like, they're doing this, like, yeah, we're gonna do a thing about, like, an egg vigilante, and they're, like, just normal filmmakers, and no one is ever like, do you think this is gonna sell?
I think it's like hinted at most, I suppose.
But it's weird not to bring it up, like, because that's, like, there you have, like, the reason people do this is because they get money out of it.
Like, UK schools cost money.
Yeah.
Like, a lot.
Yeah, and it's, like, it's interesting, too, because, like, they are clearly young, like, they talk about how they met, like, in film school, and, you know, Like, who's gonna watch the Egg Vigilante movie is a good point.
Yeah.
But the implied driving factor here has nothing to do with money. It has to do with fame, which, like... Sure.
I don't... See, I think that's more like the convincing part. Like, I think that's more of the deception. I do think the money is just sort of assumed to be an underlying factor, and I think that... And I think, like, we can give it at least that much credit, right?
Maybe the reason I'm talking about this, though, is because in the final scenes, the implication seems to be that, like, what he's getting out of this is, like, recognition.
Yeah.
Like, that's what they're talking about, like, recognition, awards. There's nothing about, and you got a sweet new car out of it.
That's true. That's true. Can you check if the BAFTA actually looks like that?
I think it does. I think I have confirmed this from our primer. So yeah, it does. I think it looks a bit different in the episode, but like
it's silvery, but that might just be the light.
Yeah.
Maybe the documentary BAFTA looks different.
Maybe.
But yeah, no. So,
if we're trying to drag things together a little bit, I suppose.
Yeah, like it's difficult because I guess I do need to talk about the counterfactual of this episode being focused on something else, maybe, for a second. Because, like, the structure of the episode is centered on the twist. And in doing that, the episode really takes away from itself the possibility of really, like, digging into the... Wouldn't that be fucked up? Let's figure out how that would look angle, right? They just, like, hard cut past all of that. And I think for making its point, the episode would probably have to actually fucking do that.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I guess I don't want to, like, envision the counterfactual too much, but I think the episode is trying to be clever, and that undermines it getting to the point that it wants to make.
Yeah, and I think it just creates this, like, small bit where they're actually realizing the horror, like, actually making it like, okay, now it's a serial killer movie for 4 or 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And you go, okay, sure, I can buy this.
Yes. And they make an effort, like an active effort, to resolve that in, like, a sort of non-confrontational way, right? Because she slips. It's not like there's never, like, the knife-wielding scene, right? They actively choose to avoid going there.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, right? Because they have, like, it does feel a little bit like they just wanted to be like, okay, we need to keep people watching until the end there. So they have this, like, bit more action-y scene for a bit, and then they go back to, let's talk about true crime. And, like, it's weird when, like, fundamentally, the summary of the twist here is, it turns out the author of the exploitation true crime documentary is actually a victim of it.
Yeah.
But, like, that was kind of already the point. His dad died in the killings as a result of it, so it's like, it doesn't change that much.
Yeah, no, I guess there's, like, a bit of irony, because, like, he's been sort of pushed to position himself as a victim, and now he's, like, really, like, stepped into it. But yeah, no, like, there's an attempt at a point here, and I don't quite get it. Cause, like, the thing in itself is, like, feels like reasonably coherent. It's like I read it as more or less interested in just pointing out vulgarity. And
I think the slide into vulgarity, right?
Yes.
Like, I think it's an incomplete vision of what makes one slide into vulgarity, but I think that's what it's trying to do, right?
And as such it works, but I think, like, the pacing and the bits that we don't see, and, like, the, like, focus on the twist being, like, at the very end, like, makes it, like, not, like, feel, like, it makes me feel like there's something I'm missing, and I don't know if I am.
It's weird, because, like, honestly, throughout most of the episode, I was waiting for the punch.
Yeah.
And it doesn't come. Like, there is a twist.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like I've been punched after it, right? It's like, okay, sure.
Yeah.
Like, I guess, dude. Like, the mom isn't, like, a fully realized character.
No.
So, like, I don't care that she was part of the serial killer. The dad being a part of the serial killer, okay, like, it recontextualizes a very small part of the overall story.
Yeah, but
the actual killings are not interesting in the context of this episode.
The episode is not interested.
Yeah, and, like, so, like, recontextualizing that doesn't actually recontextualize the... It's not really a meta story, but, like, the story around the taping of the killings and, like, the true crime documentary making. Like, it doesn't feel like it's changed as a result of the twist.
I don't know, I guess it's just, like, being a bit elaborate about making its point.
Yeah. It's a flourish, right? But it's like a... Neat. What...
I don't begrudge it. It underlines the point a bit.
Yeah, a bit, right? Like, that's the fundamental part. But it's weird to have... And, like, I can almost kind of appreciate that level of cinematography. Yeah. That you have this running tension and the punch never comes.
Yeah. Yes, and it's, like, that's, like, the entire structure of the episode, right? It's just, like, no sound, no music, always tension. Like, it's awkward, it's unpleasant at all times. And then it's just, like... And then it, like, does kind of try to do a punch, but, like, it pulls it a little bit. And
what do you think the punch is?
I mean, it is the twist, right?
Okay.
The twist is kind of the punch. But, like, then it just sort of, like, goes back to the main point, and it's like, yo, are you happy now? Obvious. And we know the answer, because the episode at no point has been subtle. Like, he's not happy.
Yeah, he's distinctly unhappy almost the entire way through.
Yeah, and he like, it's just like a rising gradient of unhappiness, and he's, in the end, he's just, like, reached peak unhappy.
Well, I think that's an interesting, too, subtle point here of, like, if you watch him, like, he goes from, like, a 5 out of 10 happiness to a 4 out of 10 happiness, and that's, like, you know, like, I don't care that much. Like, it's interesting because Pia has fun, Stuart has fun, the mum seems to have more fun than Davis, unfortunately, perhaps, but, like, there's a point to be made there, right? He never, like... Because I think the subversion, or it's not really a subversion, but, like, the morality tale here is that he would have been like, oh yeah, the next documentary is going to be my big break, and then I'll, like, finally be happy, and I'll have realized my artistic ambitions.
He doesn't say that.
Yeah, he doesn't give a shit. Like, I don't know what he wants.
See, I guess to, like, try to, like, I think they're, like, I don't dislike this episode, right? I think what it, like, the most coherent, like, summation I can make of it, it's that it's just, like, kind of a broad like, it's just like a lingering shot of the misery of the artist in these modern days of ours.
Yeah,
and
I think there's an extent to that, yeah.
And, like, it's so very interested in lingering, and it does it quite competently. And, like, sure, there's flourishes, but, like, that's it. That is the thing.
Yeah, it's like saying art isn't meaningful. It's kind of like at least not like it doesn't lead to any sort of personal realization, fundamentally, right? It takes Maslow's hierarchy of needs and says, that top bit isn't there, fuck off.
Well, yeah, it's at the very least questioning whether it's attainable under like Streamberry's regime.
Yeah, but it's interesting because, like, you could definitely have made this more about how, like, streaming, podcasts, all of that is corrupting, like, it's too much about content being made no matter what. But they really don't go down that road. Like, it's interesting to me because it seems the way that the show is largely framing it is that desire to make content comes from within, specifically from within Pia. It has very little in the ways of saying, like, here are the incentives for it. Like, it gestures vaguely at it, but it's fundamentally completely uninterested in exploring
just like,
it.
Oh man, this sucks.
Yeah. What a bitch this Pia is for making us do true crime.
I mean,
I don't think it actually
No.
lingers in Pia, but it's like interesting how there's no other like. Stuart is the other part, right? But he's kind of like, oh yeah, we should do that. Like he doesn't push for it in the same way that Pia does, and he doesn't have the same access, obviously.
And I think I suppose like for all it's like it's I suppose it's not that complex in its plot mechanics, and while it does have like a twist, it's not like it doesn't like alter the point. So I suppose I do just like appreciate the simplicity of going like, oh man, this sucks.
Yeah. I just don't think it needed an hour.
Probably. I suppose it... God, no, it didn't. No.
I think we need to answer one fundamental question. Do we think this is Charlie Brooker's autobiographical story of how being in showbiz sucks? Do you think this is him pouring his heart out and being like, oh man, I hate making this show?
No, not at all. I think Charlie Brooker probably... No, I know him even less than you do, and you don't know him.
I don't know him at all.
But at least you're familiar with his work. But no, I think what's happened here is that the episode has just been like aligned to be like coherent in what it's saying, and that's why it's like driving that point home. And like there's like that's why it's like saying that. So but like I have no impression that like there's too little of like Charlie Brooker in there.
Yeah, I think that's honestly like I think as we get deeper into the DewatchPod podcast, I think it'll be fascinating to see like to link back to this episode where it seems Charlie Brooker like the writing had a specific target and just went in on that target rather than trying to make a bigger point about society.
Yeah.
I think that's actually wild.
Yeah.
It doesn't make for a better show, but I think it's... Well, I mean, like, again, I think this is like... If we're, doing the vulgar thing here of putting numbers to our enjoyment, this was like a 5 out of 10 episode for me.
I did check the time every now and then. Because it... I know, like, I think... Like, you can have, like, nearly the same amount of lingering in 45 minutes.
Yeah.
I think that would have probably been better. But I do appreciate, like, the episode for what it is.
Yeah. It's distinctly fine.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's what most of us are going to be in life.
Yeah. And I think that's where we can leave it.
Yeah, honestly, I think it's very good to end this on a bit of a whimper. Because that's the episode. Yeah,
no, it's just like, oh, this sucks, man. And,
yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah,
it's a fine thing to say.
It's a really synecdoche of our opinion of the episode. Do you want to do a whimper with me?
That's right, we do our own sound effects.
It's very unfortunate that Podcat was not active here in the end of the episode and rather decided to scream at the start.
I guess, yeah, join us next time when we're looking at Beyond the Sea.
Which we think
might
be terrible.
Now we one of our core texts for this podcast so far is Big Joel's video about how the season sucks.
Well, I want to be clear here. It's not so much the text of Big Joel's video, it's fragmented recollections of Big Joel's video. It's seriously the text here.
Yeah, no, so that's why we will be a bit familiar with the next one. And I thought this episode was the next one for a bit. I was like, oh no, this is gonna suck. Yeah, no, tune in next time for us having a worse time.
With Beyond the Sea.
Oh boy. Guys, we just found out that Beyond the Sea is 80 fucking minutes long. Yeah. Pray for our souls.
This episode was 54 minutes, and we both agreed at least it is very, very slow. So the next one being 80 minutes!
Woo!